Well, hello everyone and welcome. My name is Sharon Bonney. I'm the Executive Director for the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar today, Developing College and Career Readiness with Paired Reading. All right, we have a lot here to talk about. All webinar participants are going to receive a certificate of attendance that will be coming to you in the mail, over email, tomorrow, within 24 hours of when the webinar has ended. Also, all the support materials that are shared during this webinar will be posted on our website. So that's a common question people ask, is if they'll receive a certificate, and they will. You'll receive a certificate within 24 hours. Also, all of these wonderful resources we're going to talk about are going to be uploaded to our Adult Educators Resources repository. A lot of our members that have participated and accessed the repository, so there's a lot of great information up there, and I just want to encourage everybody to take advantage of that. Additionally, we have an upcoming conference that's coming on March 25th through the 28th, and that's going to be in Phoenix, Arizona, and I am just really excited to share with you that we'll be announcing our mini grant winners on December 1st. So many of you have applied for a mini grant. We had over 450 applicants for the mini grants this year, and we will be awarding 50 mini grants. Additionally, this year, for the first time ever, we will have a student engagement and student strand. So if you are interested in learning more about that, contact me, Sharon Bonney at coabe.org. I'll also put my information there in the chat box in a minute. But we will have a wonderful student strand this year at our national conference. Educate and Elevate. Educate and Elevate is our national public awareness campaign, and I'm just so pleased to share that we recently learned that we won 6 International Davies Awards for our Educate and Elevate public awareness campaign. We have been able to activate the grassroots network. We've had over 37,000 contacts with legislators since we went live with this on February 1st. So you're going to hear more about that, because I'm also really pleased to share that we were picked up by Success Files with Rob Lowe. We will be on PBS. We'll have a documentary on PBS on adult education. We will also have an interstitial that's narrowcasted for the internet with they're projecting over 86 million viewers. We're also going to have an ad that will air 400 times over all the major cable networks. So they're projecting, Success Files with Rob Lowe says that conservatively speaking, we should have, between all of those efforts, over 148 million viewers will become familiar with what adult education is and the value of adult ed, all through our public awareness campaign. So excited about that, because anything we can do to raise the visibility of adult education and let people know about the great work you all are doing is so important. So today, as you know, we're here because we have our Research to Practice initiative. And the Research to Practice initiative is where we pair the journal, an article from our journal, along with our webinar, and then also along with the Adult Educators Repository, and we have a topic of the month. So as you know, the topic for this month is reading. And in our summer 2016 issue, Nicole Taylor, Daphne Greenberg, and Nicole Patton-Terry wrote an article, The Relationship Between Parents' Literacy Skills and Their Preschool Children's Emergent Literacy Skills. So that's just one of the many wonderful articles on reading that's in our journal. And I just want to mention that members can go online and download the journal for free, or you can purchase a hard copy. So today, before we go any further and before we talk about our presenter, I'd like to stop sharing my screen here for just one quick minute, and I would like to turn this over to Robert Breitbard. Now, Robert Breitbard is our lead presenter here with Burlington English, and these webinars are made possible through funding by our partner, Burlington English. So, Robert, if you'd like to go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you so much to Sharon and to all of those taking time out of their very busy weeks to participate in today's webinar. Congratulations to COABE for all that we just heard, and to all the amazing work Sharon and the board have done. And I'm really excited, as Sharon has said, to Burlington, we really enjoy stepping up and being a really powerful sponsor of what you'll see today. By the way, I am the Southeast president of the Laurie Howard fan club. So you are in for a real treat. She's one of the very best presenters and always has the best information. I know when I was a local director managing a lot of events in Florida, I always made sure every year that Laurie was part of something. So you're in for a treat. And in my years, I have to admit that my work with Burlington has been the most satisfying. For many of you who might be seeing Burlington for the very first time, we really are, super focused and on everything WIOA related and everything that's facing adult ed right now. More than 50 courses and mini courses really become just about everything that a program needs to meet the high accountability needs of today's WIOA environment. Everything from core courses, have to take that coming August 2017, our basics, our new foundations, which is getting amazing reviews, is out right now. So more than 50 courses and mini courses available to you. Of course, I think where we definitely stand alone is as someone who was a part-time hourly teacher myself for 4 or 5 years, I definitely know the ability to have Burlington really provide everything, both in class and independent learning for our students. So it really makes both veteran and emerging teachers, part-time, hourly, and full-time, very, very much their job easier with these projectable lessons that match with everything that students will see in their independent learning, as well as with worksheets that are available both for in-class and out-of-class work. Burlington really thrives in expanding learner ability, again, not just on-site, but an incredible anytime, anywhere environment, distance learning. We've also got great reviews on some of our new mobile-friendly items, particularly our mobile vocabulary practice builder. So again, I'll turn it over to Sharon and Laurie. But of course, for all of you, we look forward to finding out more about your programs and look forward to seeing you on our website at www.burlingtonenglish.com. Thanks so much, and I'll turn it back over to Sharon and Laurie.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Robert. And again, this wonderful webinar is made possible through sponsorship by Burlington English. If it wasn't for them, we would have to charge a fee and be able to cover the cost. But thankfully, thanks to their partnership, we're able to offer this free of charge to members. And so thank you again. Now I'd like to introduce you to Laurie Howard. As you can see here through her bio, she's an ESL consultant. She works with CASAS, and she's provided ESL training certification in California, Florida, Illinois, Maine, and Singapore, and is a frequent presenter at state and national level conferences. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Laurie Howard. Laurie? Laurie, we cannot see you or hear you, just so you know. So while Laurie is bringing that up, I will ask everybody to take a minute to look there at the chat box over on the right-hand side. Put your name and your program and how many people are in the room with you. We'd love to hear how many people are there with you. So you can go ahead and do that here while we're waiting for Laurie. Hi, Laurie, we see that you have it up. However, we can't hear you and it's still in the beginning mode. Okay, Laurie, so it's up now. We just need to be able to hear you.
And Laurie, from someone who's had this happen a lot just by chance, if you sometimes if you move your mouse around, sometimes the Zoom toolbar down at the bottom disappears, and of course in the bottom left hand part is a mute that oftentimes gets clicked on automatically, and of course right next to it is a up arrow which can assist with the input device for the microphone, finding the microphone. And Sharon, you should be able to unmute her. I believe that she's still muted right now.
Laurie, can you speak?
Hi, Sharon. I see her her icon's muted. Oh, I think it might have happened right now.
Yeah.
I think on your controller end, you might be able to put your mouse on her image and unmute her with the little blue dots.
Yep, so she's
There.
unmuted on my screen. Is she muted on yours?
Well, as Milton Berle used to say in the 50s, this is the joy of live television. So,
Laurie, can you say something, please?
and Laurie, on the invite you got, there's also a dial-in number as well. So you should be able to, even if there's issues with the computer microphone, you should be able to dial in.
Can you unplug your headphone, please? Can you unplug your headset? There we go.
Okay.
Hey.
Okay, great. Sorry.
Watson, come here. I need you.
Well, it worked before, so let's see how I can. Yeah, thanks. Okay, great. Great. So sorry for the problems, but hopefully you can hear me now. So hello and welcome to Developing College and Career Readiness with Paired Reading. I'm Laurie Howard, as was said to you, and I'm really excited to share paired reading with you today. Sharon said the paired reading strategy in this presentation you're going to see was developed by my writing partner, Jamie Adelson Goldstein, and me, and the slides will be available to you through COAB. Also, you can see at the bottom of the screen, there's a wiki link, and there's more materials on that wiki link, and I'll be showing you that link a few times today, so you don't have to worry about writing it down. It's also on the slides that you will be accessing. I'm going to describe the first part of the strategy and then give you a chance to ask some questions, so you can get your questions ready. But since we have so many participants, I'll just be taking a few questions, and then you'll have more time at the end to be doing that. Today, you were sent some articles. I hope some of you printed them out. If you didn't, that's okay too. But the articles that I sent you are really the heart of the reading lesson that we're going to review today. I'm going to walk you through a lesson in hopes that then you can use that lesson or that type of lesson, paired reading, with your own students. Okay, if I can move forward here. There we go. So these are the articles that you were sent today and that you can access later. So paired reading is effective in many settings. I know many of you are in college, community college, or K through adult programs, or community-based educations. Some of you are in intensive English programs or in corrections. In all of these settings, you can use paired reading. This strategy was developed for English language learners, but we have also seen success with ABE learners, adult basic education learners, adult high school learners, people who are taking the equivalency exam, and also in professional development. So you can use it in a lot of settings. We've also heard that K through 12 teachers starting from about grade 4 have found it successful as well. So I hope you'll find this strategy successful. Also, as Sharon said, I just forgot to mention, if you will put your name and your agency in the chat, we'd like to know who's with us today. And if you will type in also anybody else who's with you in your conference room, I'd appreciate that as well. In the chat, please. And if you are going to ask questions, if you could put that in the QA section. So this workshop is to talk about how reading can affect college and career readiness. And so I'm sure you're familiar with this document. So I'm going to talk about how it's going to help you with college and career readiness for your students. And we're also going to mention how this strategy meets some of the English language proficiency standards for adult education. In the handout I sent you, or you can access through COABE, you have links to both of these documents if you're not familiar with them. So our goals today, by the end of this session, you should be able to identify how paired reading lessons increase learners' strategic reading, critical literacy, cross-cultural awareness, and college and career readiness. And hopefully you'll be able to integrate paired reading lessons in your own instruction. And on the last slide today, I've given you my email address. So if you do have further questions after this webinar is over, I'd be happy to answer those questions. So let's get to the meat of our presentation right now. Paired reading is a strategy in which students form groups of 4, and then pairs of students in each group read 2 separate readings, often with different perspectives on a similar topic. So for example, what you see on the screen here in the topic of robotics, one pair might read this article on the left, Robotics Great Promise, which is a positive take on the subject, and the other pair would read an article titled Automation Killing Jobs, for the negative view. The reason we have pairs read the same text is to offer support in making meaning from print, which is especially important for English language learners, but is also important for all of our learners. When learners check their reading comprehension with a partner, they feel more confident that they've gotten what they need to get from the article, and then hopefully they're ready to share that. Working in pairs also gives students an opportunity for more chances to communicate orally about what they read, and give them another chance to cite evidence, which of course is one of the college and career readiness instructional shifts. So I know that many of you are familiar with the college and career readiness standards, and the main college and career readiness standards that is addressed through this paired reading strategy is reading anchor number 9, which is analyze how 2 or more texts address similar themes. When Jamie and I first had the standards, we were so pleased to see that what we had been working on for about 10 years before the standards came out was a standard, reading 2 or more texts and comparing them. So we're excited that that is addressed through our strategy. And also other strategies are addressed as well. Read closely to determine what the text says, CCR1, and cite evidence. So learners need to cite evidence as they use this strategy. Determining central IDs and summarizing the key supporting details. Again, students summarize and then report to their pairs. And then assess how point of view or purpose shapes the style. This also is addressed in terms of what the author is saying. And the last one, the general one, CCR10, read and comprehend complex literary and informational texts. So all of those standards are addressed using this strategy. Excuse me. In terms of the English language proficiency standards, as you may know, there are 10 English language proficiency standards, and all but 2 of them are addressed with this strategy as well. So in using this strategy, you are well covered by both the ELPS and the CCRS. So I wanted to go over the steps in a paired reading lesson with you, and I'm just going to go over briefly here, and then I'll describe each one to you. So first, students form a group of 4. Then they do pre-reading tasks, which can include schema building, vocabulary building, and also critical literacy. Then students preview and choose texts. 2 of the students in the group of 4 choose the A reading and 2 choose the B reading. They read the text and answer focus questions. Then they pair up to discuss what they read. The A's who've read the same article talk to each other, and the B's again to check their understanding. And then when they check their understanding, it's optional to go to expert groups to talk to more A's and B's from other groups. That's an option. Then they present their text information, the A's to the B's to the A's. And finally, the strategy culminates in a team task, which includes cross-cultural information, critical literacy questions, and tasks. So that is the strategy in a nutshell. And now I'm going to go over each one individually. So first, again, as we talked about, the learners form a group of 4. There are lots of ways to do this, but we find that if you start, at least when you first do it, if you start by forming a group of 4, that helps. If you have an odd number of people in the class, you can form groups of 5 for any extra students. Then you want to let students know what they're going to be reading about. So in this case, our example article is about body language and types of handshakes. So in starting the pre-reading, learners need to know just a general idea of the kinds of things they'll be reading about. So we can start off with a pre-reading activity, schema building. And so at this point, students do not have this reading in front of them. They are just looking at these pictures. And then we ask them to ask and answer these questions with your partner. If it's a lower level class, I might go through this activity as a whole group activity. But if it's a higher level class, and perhaps if they've done it before, I would put them in pairs for 3 to 5 minutes to talk about these questions that relate to the topic they are going to be reading about. Another pre-reading activity would be learning vocabulary. We want to limit the number of vocabulary words here to just what is crucial for the understanding of the learners at this point. In other words, what they have to have in order to understand the article. So I would say 5 to 8 words at maximum. One of the ways you can do it is by giving students a chart like this, have them answer the first 3 columns individually, and then talk to a partner about the 4th column on the right, and then the 5th column, so that they're getting an idea of those important words. We also want to focus on academic words, because that is also one of the instructional shifts of the College and Career Readiness Standards, to focus on academic words and words that can be used cross disciplines. At this point, the students choose an article to read. We would like to give everyone their first choice, but because we are in a group of 4 and we need 2 people to read one and 2 people to read the other, we ask them to negotiate who's going to read about body language and who's going to read about handshakes. And again, just for the good running of the class, you need to limit their choice to that. You can notice that the articles are color-coded. That helps people know which article they're reading, and only talk at the beginning stages with someone who has the same colored paper, because we don't want the other pair to see or read the first pair's article. We want them to hear about it, hear the information from the student who read it, and not read it themselves. It's important to have this sort of an information gap, so that people only know about what they read themselves and are sharing that information. Critical literacy is the next piece that is important here, and you can work with. So critical literacy engages the reader's advanced cognitive skills to critically analyze information in order to more fully understand the author's stated purpose, inferred or unstated purpose, So we're looking at the author's purpose and style, perhaps the cultural and social issues by which the author was influenced, and then the use of language or word choice and how it influences meaning. We want students to look critically at what they're reading. So they might be seeing a difference in something that was written by the New York Times, for example, or one of our, what we call tabloid papers. So you want to think about what questions you could ask about the articles. And at this point, we ask the students not read their article, but just preview it by looking at, I usually put a sentence to introduce it, and we put the source at the bottom. So we can ask students something like this, just previewing it, looking at the pictures, looking at the title, looking at the sentence above the title, and at the bottom, can you find the source? What type of text is it? What is the purpose of the article? And when was it written? So those are the kinds of activities you could use for pre-reading. And again, pre-reading is really important. We all need to preview what we're going to read in order to fully comprehend it. So it's important to do pre-reading activities with your learners. I'm going to move and see if anybody has any burning questions. I'd like to move on, but I don't want to go without. Okay, so the only questions I have here are basically procedural. Hopefully you can still hear me. Anybody else want to put a quick question in before we move on to the next part? Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure there were no burning questions at this point. Uh-oh, a couple more came up, so let me just see what I have here. Okay, where do you get the pair reading articles? So at the end of the slides, I'm going to show you that you can either get them from textbooks that have been written, or you can adapt them yourselves. And we're going to talk a little bit about that at the end, or if we don't have time for that, you can write me and I'll tell you more about that. The paired reading samples that I'm going to give you are from my wiki, not on the COAPE site. So you have, on the slides, you'll have the wiki address. And how do you choose the pairs? Again, you form a group of 4 and then have the students, depending on what they're reading, what they decide to read, that is their partner. So 2 people choose A and 2 people choose B. 2 people choose the handshake article, or 2 people choose the body language article. So it's their choice about who their partner is, in a sense. Okay, I'm going to move on at this point. Let me just close the chat box, the question box. And now I'd like to talk about, we've done the pre-reading, and now we're going to get to how the students read. So to assign learners to read, first we ask them to read the focus questions. We put some focus questions up at the top of the text, and if you have the text in front of you, you'll see the focus questions. It's important that the focus questions are text dependent. So using text dependent questions and being able to cite evidence are part of the college and career readiness standards. So if you have some focus questions in a reading you happen to be using, you might want to adapt them to make sure they're text dependent. In other words, the students have to find the information in the text. So they ask them to read the focus questions and then independently read the text and find the answers to the focus questions. So want to encourage independent reading, not teacher reading aloud or reading together, but independent reading, because that's what students need to do in the real world. So they read independently, they find the answers to the focus questions. We don't ask them to write the questions out, but they can just circle the answer they found and number it 1 or 2, depending on which question it answers. Once they're done reading independently and have answered the questions, they can work with their partner. Again, A's work with A's, B's work with B's. It's important to give them a time limit. I put 4 minutes here. Depending on the length of the article, and again, the first time you do it, it should be short, I would give everyone the same time limit. And then when the time is up, I ask how many people need more time, ask for a raise of hands. If just a few people raise hands, I'll say, okay, 30 more seconds. If a number of people raise hands, I might say a minute more or 2 minutes more. Because they're working with their partner, they don't have to have read the whole thing. Hopefully, maybe their partner will have finished, or maybe they'll go to an expert group where they'll get the information they need in order to share. But it's crucially important that everyone finishes at approximately the same time, or the activity can't go forward. So reading time limits are really important. And also, we do want to encourage our learners to read more quickly. The more quickly they read, they have to read about 200 words per minute in order to have good comprehension. We do want to encourage that as well. So, learners read. And then what comes next? After they read and have shared with their partner, we want them to share what they know. And we want them to use language frames to do it. So again, as part of our college and career readiness standards, citing evidence and using academic register is important. So we want learners to be able to say, for example, in paragraph 3, line 2, the text or the author says X. We want them to use academic register. The handshake article consists of, the body language article includes, all of that academic language so that they can participate effectively in post-secondary education or in their communities. So the college and career readiness standards encourage that. So we want to offer these language frames. I would suggest that you do this language framework before you actually use this strategy, so students are familiar with language frames and how to use them. And I usually in my classroom keep them up on the board, so or on tear sheets around the room so students can utilize them. You might want to offer a few that go specifically with an article that you're working with, but in general, your students should already know about language frames before you use this strategy, but you certainly want to encourage this use as they share what they know. So this is what they do. Again, these instructions will be up on slides. Work with your group. Use one of your focus questions to help you. Take turns with your partner, either the A's or the B's, to briefly teach the group about your reading. So we usually have in the A's, the first person does question number 1 or shares the information of question 1, and the second A shares the information about question 2, and then vice versa. The B's share their information. And while they're doing it, we ask them to cite evidence in their article and use academic register. So they're practicing the skills of the college and career readiness standards. Again, so I leave this up on the slides or on my tear sheets and give them this while they're sharing. So what comes next? After they've shared the information they learned, then we want them to think about a cross-cultural question or some other question that's come up from the reading and synthesize what they learned from the text and from their funds of knowledge, what they already know, their experience, and then share what they think. So we're going to assign a task that helps them synthesize this information. And again, summarizing and synthesizing are all college and career readiness skills. So this is what I might ask them to do, give them a Venn diagram and ask them to work together to fill in a diagram about the messages conveyed by body language and different handshakes. And they need to reach consensus in their group and use information from the text to support their ideas. So usually in the group of 4, we'll assign a recorder to fill in, and everyone can use their own chart that they are given. But one person would be the recorder and write down the group's ideas about what's positive, what's negative, and what's culture bound. So they might be given this prompt. What kind of nonverbal messages do different types of body language convey? Which are positive, which are negative, and which are culture bound? And we want to, of course, define what we mean by culture bound, which means depends on the culture of the speaker or listener. So we might say, in Japan, this body language means that, okay? And it may mean something different in another culture. Sometimes in all cultures, something is positive or negative, and those would go in the far ends of the Venn diagram. So one of the English language proficiency standard items is scaffolding. In the back of the document, there are a lot of scaffolds one of the scaffolds is to use a graphic organizer. A Venn diagram is a graphic, kind of that graphic organizer. We're asking students to complete the Venn diagram and in that way organize their thoughts or the information from their articles. So we ask them to work with their group to complete the Venn diagram. Another scaffold is a vocabulary bank. So on this paper that they get with the Venn diagram, we give them some ideas about the kinds of things that would be positive, negative, or culture bound so that they can get a start on filling in this diagram. And this information comes from their article. Some of it does. But we would be wanting them to pull other information from their article and then from their own lives and their own experiences with their own culture or with the culture of others. The third scaffold, as we talked about before, would be language frames. So again, as they are working on this group task, we remind them to use academic register and to cite evidence. So again, we would point out the types of language frames that might be helpful to them as they discuss this task. So again, as we're giving the students instruction for them to share what they think, we ask them to remember to reach consensus so that they all agree about these things and to use evidence from the reading or from your cultural knowledge about your culture. And again, we like people to share about their own cultures rather than others, if possible, just to make sure that the information is correct and that we're not offending anyone. So once they've done this task, one extension might be to write a report or that have one student from the group report to other students. They could work on the report together, and they would be given a model, for example, with spaces left there so that the students could work together to fill in the blanks here and then select a presenter and then have that student who's selected rehearse perhaps their presentation. They could give that presentation to their own group, they could give it to the whole group, or they could rotate to different groups and give that presentation. So in this way, this extension activity would give students practice in not only writing, but also in giving an oral report as well. So I just want to review the steps of the paired reading lesson. Remember that students have formed a group of 4. They did some pre-reading activities, and I showed you schema building, vocabulary, and critical literacy tasks. Then the students previewed and chose their texts. 2 students in each group of 4 chose the A article, and 2 students chose B. They read the focus questions and read their texts. They paired up to check their understanding. Then the pairs presented their text information to the other pair in their group, and then they did a team task citing evidence, using academic register, and all the information that they learned. So that is the technique in a nutshell. Let's go to questions at this point. So I'm going to open up the questions. So Cynthia Chernoff says, are they generating the questions or are you doing so? So the instructor is generating the questions. Questions for the critical literacy, the instructor is asking the questions, and then the focus questions for the reading are already printed on the top of the page that students are working with. So we're generating the questions. This says, okay. So Sarah Jordan asks, how is this adjusted for low to mid-level ESL students? So the level has to do with the reading that you're selecting. So you want to select a reading that is at your student's level or just a little bit higher. Again, one of the tenets of the college and career readiness standards is to challenge our students. but we want to give them a reading that's just a little bit harder. They just have to gather up information from the article. They don't have to understand every word in the article. And again, they're not using dictionaries when they're reading. They're reading independently. You've gone over a few vocabulary words with them that are crucial to the understanding. And so, yes, low-level students can use this activity, and mid-level. The first time you do it may take, if you have not done cooperative learning type exercises before, it may take a little bit of time for students to get used to it. But then the second time you do it, you really should have no problem. You'll hear the student activity level going up. Students are talking and excited. They have something to share. They're motivated to read because hopefully you've chosen a topic that's of interest to them. Then they have information that their other partners in their group don't have, and they're sharing that. So that's a motivation to read and then share that information, and then to talk about the group task as well. Where do you get your readings? So again, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but you can get them from a variety of books in print, and I'll give you those resources. That on the handout you have resources, and you can also adapt your own readings. That's also part of the resources of where you can find articles. These days, Newsella and other websites have leveled readings. Just be careful when you take readings from certain places to make sure that sometimes when they're adapted to lower the level, they actually end up making them more difficult. So be careful about that. But by searching a topic, you can find a pro and a con or two similar articles on the same topic. The web is wonderful for that. Should the focus, William says, should the focus questions be multiple choice, I think is what you mean, MCQs, or open-ended? They shouldn't be multiple choice. The students are looking for information. You want students to find the answer. So well, I shouldn't say that. I guess you could, at the very low level, you might want to use multiple choice, but only at the very low level, I would say. How about a T-chart as a graphic organizer? Yes, you can use any graphic organizer that you think would be applicable to the topic, and I'm going to show you a few more in the slideshow as soon as we finish with some of these questions. Lorraine says, is this technique ever used with longer readings, perhaps for more advanced students? And certainly you could use it with longer readings and more advanced readings. I would say maybe 2 pages would be the maximum, just because you want it to move along. You're doing a group activity and you want to get to the task, the group task at the end. So if the reading is too long, it might take too long to read it. And get the information from it. So you can have a highly complex article that's not very long for your advanced students. So I would suggest, maybe trying to keep it to 1 page or 1.5 at the most. I would save your longer readings for other types of reading strategies. Someone asked a question in the chat box. I will try to go look at that, or Sharon, if you want to look at that and read it to me, that would be great. So Carol says, can this be done online using Newsella and having students work in pairs? Sure, if you want to use the online program and assign them a reading from there and not print out things, I think that could work. And you just have to make sure that they all got to the correct place online, of course. Do you use Patrice says, do you use a different set of academic register words for lower level students than higher level? And I would say certainly you'd want to use ones that would come up in conversation or in articles at the lower level. And certainly you'd want to progress in terms of register with the higher level students. And Rebecca says, this strategy is perfect for students preparing for language arts writing section of the HiSET. I'm so glad to hear that, Rebecca. Thank you so much for telling me that. Okay, let me try to move over to the chat and see if I can pick up that one question. There was a question there. What special is this the one? What special accommodation features are available through your program? So So again, this is a strategy that we've developed. And so any accommodation you would need to work out with your own students. One thing you could do, however, for example, if you have a mixed class, you could group them differently and give them different readings on the same topic. So you could have beginning level groups that are reading on the same topic, but at a lower level. Or you could mix the pairs so that there'd be 2 higher level and 2 lower level students in the same group, and they would help each other. So you could use heterogeneous or homogeneous grouping, however you think would be best for your students. So if you could put your question in the chat, in the QA, I'd really appreciate it. But I'm going to stop right here, and we'll have time for questions, more questions later. Oh, I'm sorry, Liz says, this is from the chat. How can a Venn diagram have 3 separate components rather than 2 with overlap? So it's 2 with overlap, but the overlap, well, I don't know what to say about that, except we've used it this way. And perhaps it's incorrect if you agree with it. But the center component is part of both positive and negative. The reason it's overlapping in the middle and why it says, I can't remember what it says, but why it says what it says is because it can be negative in one culture and positive in another culture, and that's what makes it culture bound. So it is part of the 2 sides. It's just something that isn't only positive or only negative, and that's why it has that 3rd component. I hope that's clear, and if you have questions about that. And the last question here says, you have a resource for academic sentence frames, and yes, one of the resources is from Kate Kinsella. She is sort of the master of language frames. You can look at her work, and on our handout, you can see resources for Kate Kinsella's work. Or if you just type in language frames, you'll find it. I've forgotten the name of the gentleman who's great about language frames coming out of Stanford. You might want to look at his work as well. So I'm going to stop answering questions right now, but we'll have a little bit of time at the end. I just wanted to go over a couple more things I have here for you. Just talking about connecting paired reading to college and career readiness. And I've talked about this with you, but I wanted to go a little bit more in depth. We have a few more minutes. So in terms of college and career readiness, one of the things in doing the paired reading strategy, you get a lot of team management. You're working in teams, you're working in pairs. You can assign pairs or the team to have a recorder and a reporter and a timekeeper, etc. So those, you work on time management skills, team management skills, and of course, all of those are employability skills, which everyone needs, not only on the job, but in their everyday lives. All the soft skills we talk about as being important for really succeeding in life, in the community, in work, as a parent, etc. So all of those are involved in when you do the paired reading strategy. As I mentioned, there are graphic organizers. They help students work on critical thinking and note-taking. And as I mentioned, the extension of this paired reading strategy is oral and written reports, which can have students be working on academic language and citing evidence. I'm going to give you a few more examples of these 3 things. So this, for example, is a role chart. Not only could you just have the basic recorder, reporter, timekeeper, facilitator, but you could also use, if you're working on workplace skills, you could call someone an administrative assistant or a manager or a supervisor, presenter, or quality control, someone to check the answers to make sure they're correct. You might set up some charts like that, and I'm sure you've done those kinds of things with roles. As I mentioned, time limits are really important. We want to make sure that in order to move an activity along like this, to get it completed, you need to have time limits. You can't spend too much time in pre-reading or too much time allowing students to read or talk in their groups. So you want to set up time that you think is appropriate. I wouldn't say more than 5 minutes for each of the pre-reading activities. So you move along to the reading and then the other activities. And as you do this, you'll see what time is needed, but I would suggest starting with a fairly short article so that you can try out the strategy and complete it in your class time. Also, again, oral and written reports, it's great to give students a template like this so that they understand what needs to be put in and that they can use it as the basis for their oral report. Again, for low-level students, it might just be one sentence or two sentences, and it would certainly be words that the student is familiar with. With higher level, you could make this more complex. In terms of working with graphic organizers, they can guide discussions, organize thoughts, or be tools for note-taking. Again, we looked at the Venn diagram here. There's also what they call the PMI chart, plus, minus, and interesting. You know, what's positive, what's negative, and what's interesting about the information that they learn from these texts. Plus, you can judge someone from their handshake. A minus is hands are sometimes sweaty. And interesting, it's interesting that different people have different handshakes. So that's one example. Another example, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot I had this. So the question would be, what's good, bad, and or interesting about shaking hands with strangers? That's the question, and then a plus, minus, interesting chart. Again, you could also do a pro-con chart. What are the benefits of being able to read body language and what are the drawbacks? On the pro side, it's possible to give better customer service. On the con side, you can make a mistake. So these are all possible organizing charts you could use for final tasks. You had asked about different resources for paired reading readings, and you can find them in these resources. Each of these books have paired readings in them. And again, this list is on the bibliography. But you can also do what we did, which is find an article in the newspaper and then adapt it. Now, this can sometimes take a long time, so you want to certainly limit your time. We were doing it for this purpose of sharing it with you, so we took a lot of time to do this, but you might want to make sure that you have something that's close to being the level of your students. And you also want to make sure that the article is relevant to your students in terms of topic. You want to make sure it has it's from a good source, that it's at the level of your students, and that whatever adaptations you make don't make it any more difficult. In one of the handouts you'll find on the wiki, we have an adaptation checklist. So it just gives you some ideas of where to find materials, how to evaluate them, whether the relevance and different features you might be looking at in terms of evaluation, and then what adaptations are needed. So we've provided this adaptation checklist for you in one of our longer handouts that you can find on the wiki. So these have been our goals for today. Hopefully or I shouldn't say hopefully, I identified how the lessons increase learners' strategic reading, critical literacy, and cross-cultural awareness. And I've identified many aspects of the college and career readiness standards, as well as the English language proficiency standards that are involved when you do this kind of strategy in your classroom. And hopefully now you will be able to integrate paired reading lessons into your own instruction. I hope take a minute to reflect how paired reading might benefit your students. If you'd like to put this in the QA or the chat, I would love to hear what you have to say. In terms of reflecting how this type of strategy would benefit your students, teachers, if you're sharing it with other teachers, or your program. And then materials from this webinar. Again, I think I miswrote here when I said COAB will send you the slides. I think what they'll do is send you a link for you to access the slides on the COAB website, and not only can you access the slides, but also the articles that we've worked on, and also the handout, or the short handout. You can also go to my wiki, and there's an article you'll find the articles there. You'll find more sample paired reading texts, and you'll find a paired reading article that we wrote that might describe the task in greater detail if you still have questions about the task. Again, thank you. And any other questions before I turn it over to Sharon and Robert?
Thank you, Laurie. We really appreciate it. You did a great job.
Thanks.
And I would now like to take this opportunity to turn it back to Robert to see if he has a few final words before we close out here.
Well, hello, everyone. And again, thank you so much, Laurie. I always learn so much from your presentations. Can't wait to get my hands on all the materials and share them with everyone. Again, just some last words, again, to all of our friends out there. Very much looking forward to visiting your program, finding out more. Again, our contact information here at burlingtonenglish.com. And I would like to take just a real quick moment. Some of the things that Laurie, has built on. I love the work of course, Stephen Krashen, and even pleasure reading. How can we surround our students as much as possible, both inside and outside of the classroom? And that's something that Burlington English even shines on here. We have a incredible number of high interest readers that the students can, again, anytime, anywhere access. And it just really builds to this entire habit of reading, and for all these different purposes. So again, fantastic job, Laurie, and thank you to all the participants out there, and I'll turn it back over to Sharon.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for attending, and it was great to see you all here online. I just want to again remind you that we have the national conference coming up. I hope that you can attend in Phoenix, Arizona. Mini grant winners will be announced on the 1st of December, so make sure you check your inbox to see the emails that come in from COAB. And if you have students that you are working with and are interested in participating in our student engagement strand, contact me, Sharon Bonney at coab.org. Thanks so much, and we'll see you all later on the next webinar. Bye now.